Um, I've got my one of my best friends on here, Don Don. Let's bring him in real quick. What's
Yeah,
up,
yeah,
Don
let's
Don?
do it. Yeah.
Oh, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yep.
can hear you.
Okay. Oh, there's the camera. Perfect. Just took a delay. Hi,
Yeah.
Ben. It's nice to speak with you.
Nice to speak to
Um, I was wondering, where do you think Hitchens would stand on gender and transness?
you. I have no idea. I mean, I don't know. I'd be interested to hear what you think, but like, I could really see that going either way. Because I think that like you can sort of imagine, like it's not hard to like it's not hard to imagine Hitchens who like I think if we're being real about this, like if he'd like lived for another 10 years, right, he would have been canceled many times for many reasons, right? Some of them maybe
Yes. Yeah.
some of them may be somewhat justified, some of them totally unjustified, right? But like he would have weathered a bunch of those. And so given that, it's entirely possible. There's like a scenario where I could see him like, having undergone that enough times that he's just like incredibly irritated by sort of standard American progressives, and like he kind of wants to pick culture war fights with them, and like so he ends up having and there are people who are I think sort of somewhat in the Hitchensy sphere of who did this like in real life, right? And so
Yeah.
I can imagine him. So I could imagine him like it doesn't stretch the imagination at all to imagine like the Hitchens Vanity Fair article, or maybe they wouldn't have published it or whatever, the Christopher Hitchens.substack.com article that was that where he's saying like anti-trans things. I could imagine that. On the other hand, I could also imagine him sort of viscerally reacting against against the sort of sense of, the sense that of like, he hated, bigotry more than anything, in the sense that
True.
like a vulnerable group was being bullied, and I think that he could, and also, not for nothing, right? I mean, this is the like, it's also. I mean, he was very, he was very, very pro gay rights, and there's
Yes.
some people see an analogy there. He has he's got, he's, and obviously he hated the religious right very much, right? So like I could kind of see him like, I mean, if we're imagining it in like 2021 or whatever, he's still going around doing debate for pastors, and he might have stopped right by then, right?
Maybe.
Like I could imagine him, just because people move on to other subjects, whatever, right? It's like they have it's like I can imagine him being like, doing the Hitchens style rhetoric of like moral contempt for like, why do you care so much, how somebody identifies or whatever. It's like,
Yeah, he could definitely do that, 100%.
yeah. So
But
I could see both scenarios. I'd be curious what you think.
I do see both those possibilities, and I guess the reason why I pose this question toward you as someone who's been, researching him and writing a book about him, and your philosophy background. What about the way that he thinks about like the world? About is there any glimpses into his ontology on issues, or his specific like political ideologies that he stands with, that kind of might inform us of how he would think today about issues if he was consistent?
Yeah, well, like I said, I mean, I think the gender one is one that I could see going either way, right? Like I think like even somebody like his friend Richard Dawkins, I think has a trajectory that might be a little bit like that first one that I sketched out, right? And I think that again, I could totally imagine the second one, but so the gender one is one where it's like I'd try to be a little bit careful about that and say like I'm just not confident, right, one way or the other about it. But there are other cases where I think that like sort of culture war kinds of issues that came up since he died, that like where I do feel pretty confident about what he would have thought. So like one of the big ones for me that feels super obvious to me is is all the stuff about critical race theory and like laws to try to ban critical race theory from schools and all that stuff. And I think I actually wrote article for the Daily Beast about this where I basically said what I'm about to say about it, which is like, I think, there are two things that you can put together that like put together, I think, let you be pretty sure about what he would have, like, as sure as we can be, obviously, because the man's been dead for over a decade, right?
Of course.
But like, as sure as we can be about what he would have thought about that, because like on the one hand, he is like extremely adamant about free speech, right? Like,
Yes.
and very like there's a old Hitchens debate clip that I love where he's at is that like a university in Canada, and he's and they're he's in debate about free speech, and he has like one of my all-time favorite Hitchens debate openings where he's the first word out of his mouth is fire. There, I've said it. Granted, not in a crowded theater. And he seems to he like looks around at this like university in Canada. He's like, I seem to have said it at the dining hall at Hogwarts. But and then he goes into the history of the phrase "shouting fire in a crowded theater," and how that was the actual context was the much overpraised Oliver Wendell Holmes doing a upholding the conviction of a group of Jewish socialists who'd been arrested for passing out anti-war literature during World War I. And the point that he's using it to make is what counts as a real fire and what doesn't. Is you can't.
Of course.
Like you sort of can't trust people in positions of authority to make those determinations. And then you sort of think about those views, and then you put it together with the fact that like a lot of the stuff that's banned in these like anti-CRT bills is like sort of like, well, saying that like, American history is like bad and racist and, stuff like that. It's like, well, I mean, Christopher Hitchens was pro reparations. He actually did a, like even in the final decade of his life, I mean, there's a debate that he did on in like this like post 9/11. He wrote an essay for an anthology in the early 2000s, debated the issue, which so I think that like, given that he actually he himself agreed with a lot of the views that were that were being that would fall into like this sort of very, very vague umbrella of stuff that's described as CRT or whatever, these laws. And also that like I think just the idea of like sort of being perched over the shoulders of teachers to make sure that they're not discussing anything too divisive.
Interesting. Yeah, it'd be very interesting to see where he would go with that.
I would stake like that one. I mean, obviously I could be wrong. Obviously the man's not here to speak for himself, but I think that that one would be one where I'd be much more confident that like about what he would have thought.
Yeah. Sorry for forcing you to put a Hitchens hat on for a second.
No. I'm I like it.
No,
it was fun.
I mean, I'd be happy to try, other ones, but they have I think that the big thing, like that was kind of alluded to earlier, is I think as far as like the non-politics parts of like sort of post, hypothetical post 2011 Hitchens, what makes it a little bit complicated is like so much of those last years were defined by the sort of, Bush and Obama era culture wars about religion, right? That's like so much that was going on. And then like but the sort of shape of American culture war just changed so much over the decade or so since then. I mean, like that and there is a reason why, even after like, there is a reason why, obviously, look, there'll always be people who be interested in talking about and arguing about whatever religion and atheism. I'm even one of them, right? But like I will say, but I think there was like a particular cultural moment in the 2000s where it sort of made sense to people to kind of form their like identity kind of around that set of issues that like, that because I think the combination of the fact that people had sort of religiously motivated Al-Qaeda style terrorism on their minds so much more back then than they do now, and the fact that like back in the 2000s, like you're sort of the sort of liberal anxiety about conservatives was less like what it is now, which would be like, oh, you know, you're a racist, or authoritarian or whatever. All that might have been in the picture somewhere, right? But like really the primary thing was like, oh, you're like a theocrat who wants to, like teach creationism in the schools, and and force gay people back into the closet, all that stuff, right? And but I think it's just like that cultural moment where it's like sort of banding together, of just kind of on the basis of secularism as the big thing you identified about, I think is really past. I think that people have that like people are just fighting about different issues and different configurations now. So like you look at the fact that somebody like Sam Harris went from being like one of the four horsemen of new atheism with along with Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins and Daniel Dennett, to being somebody, I mean, I know people argue about how meaningful this label ever was, but like being, in the IDW, right, the intellectual dark web, with...
I mean, we can also talk about, I think his main focus also running a meditation app today, so...
Yeah, that's true too, right?
Right, I think we can look at the trajectory of like his intellectual life and kind of where he is today is also really interesting.